Good evening, I'm Kris Dmytrenko, filling in tonight for Pedro. Now, you all know about the Occupy movement, but since long before occupying was cool, a handful of parishes in Boston have been occupied around the clock. Not by protesters, but by parishioners. Their parishes were slated to close, and they were opposed to it. So they started a vigil, and they're not leaving. Now, we're not going to get into the specifics of those cases or the complicated appeals process, but we are going to talk about parish closures and amalgamations. Now, to begin, we're going to hear from some parishioners in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and they tell us how the faithful responded when 3 parishes were amalgamated into one.
St. Pius was the first church to be sold and to close, and it was certainly a very sad, very sad time for all of us to be leaving the place where we'd come together on a weekly basis as community and as family, really.
People are used to their parish, they like going to their own church, and they have a lot of things in the church which they might have dedicated, their families paid for, and it's their church, so that was the first bridge to cross.
Joining me now in studio, Father James Mallon, pastor of Saint Benedict Parish in Halifax, the one that we just heard about in the clip, and also the founder and director of the John Paul II Media Institute. And hello, Father Jim Roche. You're one of the Episcopal Vicars for the London Diocese for Windsor, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're a priest who knows a thing or two about parish closures.
Yeah.
And amalgamations. Now, both of you were involved in situations where parishes had to close or were combined. Just so that we understand the issues involved, tell us why it had to happen in your diocese. If you could begin, Father Jim.
About year 2000, I was given an assignment of these 2 old, idyllic, parishes, holes in the roof, not having paid the bills, nobody attending, and I was just sent there. No marching orders.
Okay.
But someone knew something was going to happen because they were had both clustered, or came to a joint session, but each retaining their individuality.
Okay.
And so I was there in July of 2000, and July 30th, or maybe it was August 1st, I decided they're both going to close, and it was just reading the signs of the times. I read the books, I saw the people, a church with 1,200 seats, and there's 100 people in the church, and it was like, hello out there.
You have to do the math.
Yeah. So it was just, people, money, situations, no parking, all of that. And it just said, yeah. And how they responded. There was one council when I brought together. And
a parish council.
Yeah. They looked in shock, cried a bit, and then just said, I guess you're right.
And I'm going to ask you about sort of what that new reality was for your parish. But first, Father James, in Halifax, what happened there and what were some of the issues involved in your amalgamation?
Well, really why we did what we did is rooted in the fact that we had a leader who did what a leader should do.
Okay.
And that is to get up on the heights and look out to see where are we going and what's coming our way, and to look at the reality that we have right now. In one sense, if you've got an empty church that seats 1,200 people, it's relatively easy to know what the right thing is to do, even though it's difficult to do it. Sometimes it's harder when things, for the most part, still look pretty good. But when you actually go up and look around and do the math, then you realize that if we're to avoid total disaster 20 years from now, we've got to do something now. And it takes a courageous leader to do that, because the people around us often say, well, what are you talking about? There's no need to do this. So it was Archbishop Prendergast who did this, and we went through a process in our diocese called Forward in Faith, where there was a total assessment of the pastoral needs of the diocese, based on the fact of that the infrastructure of our diocese was outdated. 80% of our churches were in the urban center of the city. Since that time, there's been a move to the suburbs, a total decline in church attendance, the most accelerated change in culture in history in the last 50 years. And and the fact that we were still enslaved to this infrastructure of churches within half a mile of each other, staffed with full-time priests. Things have changed. Things have to change. What we're doing cannot be sustained. And so they did an assessment of the entire diocese, and they said, it was actually very wise. It was a very different approach from what they did in Boston. They said, in this area, there needs to be one parish. So they made that decision, but then they went to the parishes and said, you work it out. We believe in subsidiarity, so you decide what that's going to look like for you.
And so they were involved.
In my last parish, I was pastor of St. Thomas Aquinas, a very kind of established and old traditional parish, and the neighboring parish, Canadian Martyrs, had been run by the Jesuits. And pastoring those two parishes, the decision was to amalgamate. We became one legally and canonically, but kept both church buildings open, and it became quite vibrant. Some parishes chose to close, and in my present parish, they actually chose, the three parishes, to amalgamate and then begin a closure process and the building of a new church.
And so that is that the difference between what you would call an amalgamation and a clustering of parishes? Is with the clustering, the buildings remain open then?
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. They can be two entities, two financial communities, etc. But what Father James is talking about was that, Archbishop Prendergast developed a plan, and then we did it. There was no plan in the year 2000 in the Diocese of London.
Were people not really thinking that far ahead at that point?
Oh, well, yeah, you could see. I mean, they were all auto workers. The majority of people that are part of the Windsor system scenario are, members of the automotive industry or the supply industry. And they knew things were happening, but it just happened that, I just said, it's got to be done. And I moved the church, the diocese, to that point a little bit. I'm sure there were others, walking with me. But the factor is that the plan didn't come about until after I had taken the two churches, sold them. They're still major churches. One's Coptic Orthodox, one is Chaldean Catholic. So we fed into new communities that were in the city. Again, the Middle Eastern world. And we moved on to a church that was, a result of the emigration after World War II.
See, the distinction between clustering and amalgamation is a key one.
Okay.
Because in many areas of the country, we're choosing the clustering option. Clustering simply perpetuates the outdated structure and just basically doubles the priesthood duties. You will now do twice the things. You will do everything twice. You'll have two pastoral councils, two finance councils, two distinct parishes that share you as your pastor. Well, there's no surer way than to kill our priests than to do that. And it's, in many ways, it's a refusal to deal with the realities. It's an easy way out to maintain the status quo and refuse to look at what has to change. And I think in some senses, in the rural areas, clustering really is the only option.
Okay.
But in the urban areas and even the suburban areas, amalgamation has to be chosen. Amalgamation means that these communities become one church. They truly become one church, as one parish. Now, what that's going to look like, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to come into one building, because let's face it, even most parishes, if you have 4 masses in your parish, 80% of those people don't know that the other 80%, the others exist from any other mass time. People go to the Saturday Mass, they go to that Mass. They go to the Sunday night 9 a.m., they go to that Mass. You have 4 distinct worshiping communities, each with different flavors. So it raises questions of what it means to be church. If we can have 4 worshiping communities in one parish, why can't we have 4 worshiping communities in one parish and 2 buildings?
Now I want to talk more about sort of what happened afterwards in both of your situations. But we're actually going to show you what happened with those 3 parishes who moved into one building in Saint Benedict in Halifax in just a few moments.
Let us know your perspective. Email us at perspectives@saltandlighttv.org or reach us by mail, Perspectives at Salt and Light Television, 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C 1P1, or call us toll-free at 1-888-302-7181. Let your perspective be heard.
think God built the community. I think our faith built the community.
The whole concept of this church, it's geared to communicate well with people.
Where my family gathers to worship is where our home is. People, I believe, value the relationships they have with other parishioners, so it does feel like home.
This is a church which I love to attend. It's a happening. I look forward to going to Mass in Saint Benedict.
I'm back in studio with Father Jim Roche, Father James Mallon. In the situations where your parish is amalgamated and yours formed one new parish, Saint Benedict, which we just saw, did you end up losing people, or was the parish revitalized? What happened? Father Jim.
Well, scene was we had three churches that were a hop, skip, and a jump from each other around the corner. 4 minutes here and 4 minutes there.
So they could easily go to.
Yeah. We picked the parish out of the three that were there. We picked the place with the easiest access, on roads, the best parking, the best flavor of money, and went and found a name because Martin de Porres, Christ the King, and St. Gabriel's had nothing in common.
Okay, yes.
So it became Corpus Christi, an old Windsor name that was an old high school name. So they voted on it. I picked the lovely names, but the one that my favorite didn't win.
Okay.
But the fact is that, we lost people.
About what percentage would you say?
Oh, I'd say 30, 35%.
Really?
At least.
And why do you think they would not choose to just go to the parish down the street, the new parish?
I think what Father James said already. It's the culture, it's the times,
Okay.
it's all of that.
Yeah.
Plus we're taking away their churches.
Okay.
So there's those are the elements that are there. But you just work at getting them back. You just be steadfast and be honest and doing outreach.
Now, what happened in your situation, Father James?
Well, the point is that anytime you change, you're going to lose people, because in many sense we suffer in the church from a crisis of identity, deep identity, in terms of what it means, the fundamental reason for our existence, that is to be in mission. And we are very much stuck in a maintenance mode, and maintenance doesn't do too well when you come to change things. At Saint Benedict Parish, the pastor before me did an amazing job of bringing these communities together, going through the process, and they built an incredible church. They built a brand new $10 million church. You saw some of the footage. There was a great excitement. When there's newness, it's wonderful. And I came in about 2 months after the church was built. And my main point was, if we just come in, if all you do is amalgamate physically and restructure and come into this new place and keep on doing what we've always been doing, we're going to be amalgamating again in 20 years. Because it's not enough to come into this new place and keep doing things the same. So I had a strong sense that my job is, this church of brick and mortar has been built. Now I've got to build a church of living stones. I've got to work on the people. And I've got to propose a cultural change in how we experience church. Because the reason we lose people in the beginning with these kinds of changes is because of I think a deeper crisis of identity of what it actually means to be church.
And what do you think that solution is? What is the solution to this crisis of identity? What kind of culture do we need to be installing in these churches?
I'll use the analogy in my parish that we had 3 ships heading on a course. They were being drawn by a powerful current called that culture, society, the changes, whatever. And if you climb up on the mast and look into the distance, you see we're headed towards the rocks. So the captain has to make a decision. We've got to change course. We don't have the engine power to change course. We can't do it. We're stuck in this current. So the amalgamation, in a sense, is bringing these resources together. Now we've got a ship that can actually turn out of this water. But it's not enough to just amalgamate these ships if you don't change your course, because you're still going to hit the rocks. It may not be as evident, but in our experience at Saint Benedict, now we have tremendous resources, and in the first year and a half, there's been such tremendous change in a positive spirit, in real growth, because in addressing this need for a cultural shift, and whether it's developing a proportional staff that can then begin to offer pastoral ministries in courses and formation programs on a proportional level to the size of our parish, and even moving people out into homes. This past year, we've run 58 programs of faith formation in our parish for youth, children, and adults, and the building is maxed out. So we're now moving into homes. We're running small groups in homes. We're developing these groups called pastorates, groups of 25 to 35 people who meet twice a month in a home. That is going to be their primary experience of community. That is where they're going to be loved, cared for, called forth, and their gifts are going to be recognized.
Certainly,
they are
because-
lay-led groups because I'm the only priest, and by multiplying ministry like this is the only way we're going to grow to become a healthy church.
So less parishes, there are less priests and more parishioners. In a word, I mean that can lead to burnout. In a word, what would you say you need as pastors? What can the laity do to help you move into this new reality?
I think affirmation is one thing that, they might not be in church, but I mean, they can see at the supermarket.
Okay.
Because I do the grocery shopping too.
Yeah.
I think I need to be where they are sometimes, and be part of a community rather than be apart from the community. And I think the community is all over the place. So it just can't be, I expect them to be with me, but I do expect them to be affirming. And some of the things that, any of the programs that we're doing, I'm not into small groups. That's maybe I need to, tag along with Father James here and to find out what he is doing that might be advantageous for me. But I tend to maybe use an older model, but with an older crowd. I mean, I tell people I dyed it from ginger, and I dyed it gray so I could identify with my parishioners.
Right.
So I mean, the factor is that there has to be new ways, and I think Father James is telling us, what some of them are and how he's addressing it. I'm not into maintenance, the model. I'm into mission, but it's on a very, a lower intense level.
I think, my first week at this new parish, a number of people said to me, "Oh, Father James, you've got a big job ahead of you." And the next weekend I got up and I said, "Look, a lot of people said this to me, and if that's what people think in this parish, then I have no option but to resign." Because you're putting me in a possible place. The issue is not I have a big job. We have a big job. We have a big job. We need to change that. And what do I need of parishioners? I need them to embrace the mission of the church and embrace the life of authentic discipleship, who will recognize their call to serve the Lord and their call to give of their gifts. And my job as a pastor is to look out and see all of those gifts, like fruit unplucked from trees, with incredible potential, and to call those gifts into the service of the church, and then release people into ministry.
So affirmation and collaboration in that shared mission.
I get tons of affirmation. I mean, it's like, let's start affirming each other. Let's, instead of the lay people affirm, "Oh, Father," I remember one time, I get the story, this lady in my parish, "Father, great homily." I didn't even give the homily that weekend. It's like, let's affirm each other. Like, let's create a culture in our parishes where we call forth each other's gifts. And my job as a pastor is to be about low control, high accountability. Let's have an accountability structure within our parish, but let's have low control so that ministry flourishes. And the key thing as a pastor is for me to make sure I've got the right people in leadership. That's key. If I've got the right people, I can leave them and I can release them to do what they have to do.
Now let's be affirmed by the Word of God. It is time for our last words, and our scripture passage here tonight is from Ephesians. Chapter 4, it reads, "From Christ the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work." Final thoughts, Father Jim.
Ditto with what Father James just said, that we need to be, a people that, are involved in community, and without community. I usually use the example of the crucifix, with the corpus. There's the I and God, me and God, branch, and then there's also the, the horizontal branch, that's us, and it has to be all together.
Father James?
the church is built up in love. I mean, the fathers of the church tell us that the pagans look to the early Christian community and says, look how they love one another. Is there authentic love and caring taking place in our parishes? That's a very important question for us to ask. Where people do experience themselves being loved authentically and really, then you have community, then you have real belonging, which leads to real believing and eventually real behaving as well.
Now that's all the time that we have, but before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Father James, about some of the new projects that you're working on with the Media Institute.
Just finished this summer a large 2-year project called Dogmatic Theology. It's where, shall we say, putting the dog back into dogma. It uses humor and different elements. It's going to actually be broadcast pretty soon by Salt and Light Television.
Fantastic.
And we're just finishing production on a 4-week series featuring Father Robert Spitzer entitled In the Beginning, Evidence for God from Physics. It's a 4-week lecture series before a live audience in which he takes the discoveries in cosmology in the last 25 years and shows how it points towards theism. It's very dynamic, and Father Robert Spitzer is amazing.
Well, we look forward to that. Well, thank you very much, Father James, and thank you, Father Jim.
Thanks for the invitation.
Now, as always, this show is about your perspective as well. You can go to our Facebook page or email us at perspectives@saltandlighttv.org. Thanks for watching, and good night.